It's late December 2025, and the air in this forward command tent is thick with the chill of a winter night somewhere I can't name. The only light comes from the red glow of the tactical lamps, easy on the eyes after hours in the dark, and the flickering digital maps on the screens in front of me. The low hum of ventilation fans mixes with the distant thump of rotors winding down outside. My team's just exfiltrated from another op, and the adrenaline is fading, leaving that familiar bone-deep fatigue. My shoulders ache from the weight of the plate carrier I haven't fully shed yet, and there's a heaviness in my chest that's got nothing to do with the gear. I'm a SEAL team commander. Call sign doesn't matter here. I've led men through hell and back more times than I can count without flashing back to faces I'll never forget. But tonight, as I sit here staring at the after-action markers on the map, I feel the need to get something off my chest. Not in a debrief, not in some polished report that'll get filed away in a classified folder. This is a confession, raw, personal, the kind you don't say out loud in the ready room. In covert missions, the thing that kills a team isn't always the enemy. It's not the bullets or the IEDs or even bad intel. It's rigidity. That stubborn refusal to bend when the world shifts under your feet. In covert operations, what kills formations isn't the enemy, it's inflexibility. I'm not writing this to brag about victories or polish some heroic narrative. I've got plenty of those stories locked away, the ones that make for good bar talk back home, if we ever talked about them. And I'm sure as hell not doing it to pat ourselves on the back. No, this is about adaptability. The raw, unforgiving trait that separates the survivors from the ones left behind. It's the difference between coming home whole and not coming home at all. Over the past couple years, I've had the privilege and sometimes the headache of running joint ops with Marines. Not your standard grunts, mind you, but select teams pulled in for specialized tasks alongside my SEALs. These were coordinated missions blending our worlds. My guys, trained from day one for the shadows, the water insertions, the silent takedowns, and theirs, forged in the Marine tradition of iron discipline, overwhelming firepower, and that unbreakable esprit de corps. My first impressions? Damn impressive. These Marines walked in with that trademark steel spine posture, physiques built like tanks, and a work ethic that could shame a SEAL platoon on a bad day. They'd run circles around most units in endurance marches, and their fire discipline was textbook perfect. I remember thinking, these guys are built for the long haul, real warriors. But as we prepped for our first real joint covert runs, a question gnawed at me. Could they adapt fast enough in the world of secret warfare, where plans die in the first contact, where the rules aren't written down, and where hesitation costs lives? Conventional thinking drills in procedures for a reason. They work in big battles with clear lines. But in the dark, in the gray zones we operate in, clinging too tight to the playbook can get you killed. I didn't voice that doubt outright. You don't question Marines' grit to their faces unless you want a spirited debate, but it lingered as we geared up. Little did I know, those joint ops would teach me more about adaptability than any Bud's Hell Week ever could. And not just about them. About all of us. This confession isn't official. It's for the ones who've been there, or for anyone wondering what really keeps us alive out there. Because in the end, adaptability isn't some buzzword, it's the edge. And watching those Marines grab it with both hands changed everything.
Adaptability isn't improvisation. It isn't throwing the plan out the window and winging it. That's how good men die stupid deaths. Real adaptability is disciplined chaos, knowing the rules inside out so you can break them intelligently when the situation demands it. It's discipline married to an open mind, the ability to hold a plan lightly enough that you can let it go the second it stops serving the mission. Covert warfare is nothing like the conventional battles most people picture when they think of Marines storming beaches or holding lines against waves of enemy infantry. In the world my teams live in, there are no clear front lines, no safe rear areas, no artillery grids you can call in with confidence. The battlefield is fluid. Urban alleys one night, mountain ridges the next, river deltas after that. The enemy doesn't wear uniforms you can spot at 300 meters. Sometimes he's the guy selling tea on the corner. Sometimes he's the kid waving at your convoy. And your plan? No plan survives first contact intact. Ever. The moment boots hit the ground, variables you couldn't predict start rewriting everything. As a SEAL team commander, my job isn't just to execute. It's to decide, fast, in the gray. Intel is always incomplete. Timelines compress. One wrong call and people don't come home. The moral weight of that never gets lighter. You learn to live with it, but it's always there, pressing against your chest in the quiet moments before insertion. That's why when Hire started attaching Marine elements to our task units for certain sensitive missions, I paid attention. Marines bring things we don't always have in abundance: raw endurance, heavy firepower when you need it, and a team cohesion that's legendary for good reason. They can carry loads that would crush most operators and still fight at the end of a 20-mile movement. Their small unit leadership is outstanding, and pound for pound, nobody matches their aggression when it's time to close with the enemy. But aggression and endurance are only part of the equation in covert work. The real question was whether that same culture, built on ironclad procedures, battle drills rehearsed until their muscle memory, and a proud tradition of never backing down, could flex fast enough when the script got ripped up. Because in our game, the enemy gets a vote, and he usually votes early. I've seen highly trained units freeze, not from fear, but from cognitive dissonance when reality refused to match the rehearsal. A perfectly executed bound turns into a cluster because the breach point is wired differently than Intel said. A sniper overwatch position is compromised by a goat herder who wasn't supposed to be there. Suddenly the timeline collapses, comms glitch, and someone has to make a new plan in seconds. That's where adaptability lives or dies. Marines aren't selected for covert roles the same way SEALs are. We're filtered for unconventional thinking from the start. Guys who can solve problems with chewing gum and det cord. Marines are forged into a different kind of weapon. Reliable, predictable in the best way, able to execute complex maneuvers under fire because everyone knows the playbook backward. That strength is also a potential liability when the playbook stops working. Yet command kept sending them to us. Not because they were disposable, never that, but because someone upstairs saw the potential. They could take punishment like no one else. They would never quit. And if we could teach them to think in the gray, to shift from doing it right to doing what's needed right now, they might become something unprecedented, conventional warriors who could operate like ghosts. I'll be honest, going into our first cycles together, I wasn't sure it would work. I respected the hell out of them, but respect doesn't keep people alive when the situation goes sideways in ways no SOP covers. Adaptability isn't a skill you can brief in a PowerPoint slide. It's a mindset, and mindsets take time to reshape. But war has a way of accelerating lessons, and over the months that followed, those Marines taught me something I didn't expect. That the same traits that make them unbreakable in a stand-up fight, discipline, loyalty, raw courage, can, under the right pressure, become the foundation for extraordinary adaptability. It just hurts like hell getting there.
The pre-mission brief took place in a plywood room that smelled of fresh sawdust and diesel. We'd flown in the night before, and the air was already thick with that unspoken sizing up that happens whenever SEALs and Marines share the same sandbox for the first time. My platoon sat on one side of the folding tables, the attached Marine Special Operations team on the other. 12 of my guys, 8 of theirs. Everyone in multicam, everyone bearded or mustached to some degree of operational necessity, everyone trying not to look like they were measuring dicks. But we were. The language gap hit immediately. I'd start talking about sensitive site exploitation with non-standard exfil, and I'd see a couple of the Marines' eyebrows twitch, words they knew individually, but not in the order we used them. When their team leader briefed their assault package, he used terms like support by fire and limit of advance that felt almost quaint in the context of the low-visibility target we were going after. We nodded politely. They nodded politely. Everyone understood the plan on paper. The objective was straightforward on the slides:
Infiltrate a River Valley compound, neutralize a high-value individual running logistics for an insurgent network, grab everything that wasn't nailed down, and get out before local reaction forces could mobilize. Primary route in by small boats, alternate by foot. Exfil by helo on a 2-hour window. We'd rehearsed it twice on a mock-up site. Looked clean. Reality started rewriting the script about 6 minutes after we hit the drop-off point. First came the rain, hard tropical sheets that turned the riverbank into slick mud and cut visibility to 50 meters. No problem for insertion, we'd trained in worse, but the current was stronger than forecasted and we lost 20 minutes fighting it just to reach the primary landing site. That delay rippled forward. Then the dogs. Intel said the compound had none. Wrong. 3 of them started going berserk the moment we crossed the outer berm, and within seconds every light in the village a click away came on. So much for quiet compromise on the side gate. Plan A was dead in under 10 minutes. I made the call to shift to the alternate breach point on the north wall. Higher risk of observation, but it bought us distance from the village. My SEAL assaulters flowed left without hesitation, muscle memory from 100 room-clearing drills in ever-changing kill houses. The Marines followed, but I could feel the friction. They moved fast, credit where it's due, but I saw it in their spacing, their head positions. They were waiting for the next command in the sequence we'd rehearsed, the one that no longer applied. We breached the wall clean. No contact yet. Inside the compound, the layout matched the satellite imagery almost perfectly. That was the problem. It lulled us into thinking the plan was back on track. The HVT wasn't in the main building where he was supposed to be sleeping. He was in a small outbuilding we'd tagged as secondary storage. One of my point men spotted movement through a window and held the stack. Good call. But now we had to redirect the entire flow, shift the assault axis 90 degrees while the support element was already set on the original overwatch. That's when the half-beat delay happened. The Marine fire team leader, solid guy, multiple combat tours, hesitated for maybe 3 seconds. Not cowardice, not incompetence, just the mental recalibration from execute the briefed sequence to improvise a new axis under contact. 3 seconds is nothing in a conventional assault. In a covert hit, it's an eternity. In those 3 seconds, a sentry we hadn't seen stepped out of the shadows with an AK. He got off a burst before one of my snipers dropped him. The whole compound erupted. Lights, shouts, doors banging open. The quiet op we'd sold to hire was gone. What followed was 15 minutes of controlled violence. We cleared the buildings, found the HVT hiding in a crawl space, zip-tied him, grabbed laptops and phones, but the exfil window was collapsing. Local QRF was already moving, truck engines echoing up the valley. I watched the Marines in those minutes, and I saw 3 different reactions play out in real time. Some froze, not physically, but mentally. They fought hard, returned fire accurately, but every movement was 1 step behind, still trying to execute the original plan in their heads. You could see it in their eyes, waiting for orders that matched the rehearsal. A couple went the other way, overcorrected into pure aggression. One Lance Corporal charged a doorway without stacking properly, nearly got himself shot by friendly fire. Raw courage, 0 adaptability. And then there were the ones who started to shift. A sergeant who, without being told, peeled off his assault role to set security on our new exfil route. A corporal who grabbed a wounded insurgent and dragged him into cover, not because the ROE briefing said to, but because he realized the guy might have intel we needed, and we didn't have time to search bodies. Small decisions made in seconds that kept the whole thing from unraveling. We got out. Everyone came home. The HVT was on the bird, the drives were in evidence bags, and we even managed to deny the site properly. On paper, it was a success. But sitting in the helo as we lifted off, watching tracers stitch the sky behind us, I knew we'd been damn lucky. That half-beat delay, that moment of doctrinal inertia, had nearly cost us everything. The collision between Marine training and the chaos of covert work wasn't their fault. It was the first real proof that respect and capability on their own aren't enough, not in this world. The The ones who adapted that night, really adapted, were the ones who started asking themselves a new question in the middle of the firefight. Not what's next in the plan, but what needs to happen right now so we all go home. That question was about to become the only one that mattered.
I've commanded a lot of men in my career, but 3 Marines from that first cycle burned themselves into my memory. They weren't the loudest, the strongest, or even the most experienced on paper. But in the crucible of those early ops, they showed me what adaptability really looks like when it takes root in a Marine's soul. First was Corporal Jake Ramirez, 22 years old, straight out of infantry training battalion. Texas kid, small-town high school football linebacker, who enlisted right after graduation. He looked the part. 6'2", thick neck, the kind of frame that fills out a plate carrier like it was custom made. On the range, he was a machine. Top shot in his platoon, ran sub-13-minute 2 miles, never bitched about weight. You'd think the world of covert ops would eat him alive. Too green, too used to clear orders and linear battle drills. But Jake carried a fear he never admitted out loud until much later. He told me once, over a quiet cigarette after a long movement, that his biggest dread wasn't dying. It was letting his team down by not knowing what to do when nobody told him what to do next. In the Corps, they drill obedience and initiative into you, but always inside a framework. Take that framework away, and some guys feel naked. That night in the River Valley compound, when the plan collapsed and we pivoted to the north wall, Jake was in the assault stack. The sentry opened up, rounds snapped past us, and the whole world narrowed to muzzle flashes and shouted commands. Jake's first instinct was textbook: return fire, wait for the next order in the sequence. But the sequence was gone. I saw him hesitate, just a flicker, then something shifted. He didn't wait. He saw the HVT's outbuilding door hanging open, saw shadows moving inside, and he broke left without being told, drawing fire away from the main stack so the rest of us could flank. Later, when we were clearing rooms, he was the one who grabbed the laptop off the desk and stuffed it into his kit while still piecing a guy who was trying to bring an RPG to bear. No order given, just pure recognition of what mattered in that moment. That was the threshold he crossed, from waiting for permission to act to deciding what needed doing and doing it. Then there was Staff Sergeant Marcus, or Gunny Hale, 31, on his 4th combat tour. Gunny was the kind of Marine NCO legends are built around. Iraq twice, Afghanistan once, now here. He'd been in more conventional firefights than most of us had hot meals. Thick southern drawl, perpetual dip in his lip, and a stare that could make a private confess to crimes he hadn't committed yet. Gunny didn't lack initiative. He'd led platoons through hell with comms down and no air support. But his internal conflict was different. He trusted the system because the system had kept him alive for 15 years. When plans changed mid-mission, you could see the gears grinding. Not fear, discomfort. Like watching a master mechanic forced to fix an engine with the wrong tools. He hated the chaos of our world because it felt like gambling with his Marines' lives. In that first op, Gunny was leading the support by fire element. When we shifted breach points, his position no longer covered the main threat axis. He could have dug in and provided overlapping fields of fire on the original plan, perfect by the book. Instead, after that half-beat pause I'll never forget, he displaced his entire team under contact, bounding back 200 meters through open ground to set up on a ridge that actually mattered. It exposed them for 30 terrifying seconds, but it pinned the enemy long enough for us to extract the HVT. Afterward, on the helo, he didn't celebrate. He just stared at the floor, chewing the inside of his cheek. Later, he told me, "Sir, I spent years teaching my guys that deviating from the plan gets people killed. Tonight, I told them to ignore it. Felt like I was breaking my own religion. But he did it anyway, and the next time the plan went to shit, he didn't hesitate at all." Finally, there was Lance Corporal Sarah Doc Brennan, the corpsman attached to the Marine element. 24, former EMT from Chicago. Quiet, almost bookish behind her glasses. Physically the smallest in the stack, and some of the guys, on both sides, quietly wondered if she'd hold up under the ruck weights and the pace. Doc made a mistake early that night. During the initial insertion, she misstepped on the muddy bank and went down hard, twisting her ankle.
Not broken, but enough to slow her. In a perfect world, we'd have medev'd her out, but we were already compromised. She waved off help, taped it up, and kept moving. Pride, sure, but also that stubborn Marine refusal to be the weak link. Her turning point came inside the compound. One of the insurgents took a round to the gut and was screaming in a corner, loud enough to give our position away if we left him. ROE said neutralize threats, but he wasn't reaching for a weapon anymore. Most of us would have double-tapped and moved on. Doc didn't. She crawled over under fire, slapped a tourniquet onto the leg. He had taken a fragment there too, and injected ketamine to shut him up. Then she dragged his dead weight into a room we'd already cleared and started an IV. I thought she'd lost her mind until she pulled a phone off him with fresh texts coordinating the QRF that was closing on us. That phone gave us their route and bought us the minutes we needed to exfil before they sealed the valley. She learned faster than anyone. After that night, Doc became the one who anticipated. She'd reposition trauma kits based on how the fight was flowing, not where the plan said we'd need them. She started thinking 3 moves ahead, not because anyone told her to, because she'd felt the cost of being 1 move behind. Watching those 3 evolve, Jake finding his initiative, Gunny rewriting his instincts, and Doc turning perceived weakness into decisive strength, that's when I began to believe, not in the Marines as an institution, but in these specific Marines. They weren't adapting because they were SEALs in disguise. They were adapting because the fire forged them into something new, something that still carried the Marine backbone, but now bent instead of broke. And that's the moment I stopped doubting whether they belonged in our world.
Not every mission ends with a clean exfil and a handshake on the flight line. Some end in silence, rotors thumping away into the dark while you count heads and realize the number doesn't match what you started with. The one that still keeps me awake happened 3 months after that first River Valley hit. We'd run 4 more joint ops by then. Small, surgical, mostly successful. Confidence was building. The Marines were moving better in the shadows, asking fewer is-this-by-the-book questions, starting to read the battle space the way my SEALs did. I let myself believe we'd turned the corner. The task was a disruption mission deep in hostile territory. Locate and destroy a cached weapons shipment before it could reach a cell planning attacks on local partners. No HVT, no exploitation, just in, confirm, deny, out. Low signature, no reinforcements closer than 4 hours. We took 10 SEALs and 10 Marines, split into 2 elements for redundancy. Everything went right, until it didn't. Primary site was empty. Cache had been moved in the last 24 hours. SAT intel missed it. We shifted to the alternate grid, 10 clicks west through rough mountain terrain. Night was clear, cold, perfect for NVGs. Movement was quiet, no compromise. We found the cache in a shallow cave system. Crates of rockets, mortars, enough to keep a battalion busy for weeks. Demo was set, timers synced. Standard. Then the ambush hit on the way out. They'd been waiting, small force, disciplined, no radio chatter we'd detected. They let us walk into the kill zone before opening up. First burst took out our trail security before he could call contact. 15 seconds of chaos. Green tracers crisscrossing the valley, rocks exploding around us. We broke contact hard, bounding back toward the exfil LZ, but 1 Marine didn't make the first bound. Lance Corporal Tyler Rook Morrison, 19 years old, second deployment, always smiling in the ready room. Called Rook because he was everybody's favorite chess opponent on the long flights. He'd been point on trail when the ambush kicked off. Took multiple rounds, center mass. No chance. We couldn't stop, couldn't recover him. The weight of enemy fire and the collapsing timeline forced us to keep moving. By the time we reached the bird, the valley behind us was lit with flares and small arms fire. Rook was left on the mountain. We lifted off in silence. No one spoke the entire flight back. Just the whine of turbines and the occasional cough or sniffle nobody acknowledged. As the commander, the guilt lands on you first and hardest. I replayed every decision. Route selection, spacing, whether we should have aborted when the primary site was dry, whether I'd pushed the team too deep chasing confirmation. You tell yourself you made the best call with the information you had. Most nights, that doesn't help. But the Marines took it differently. They didn't rage or break gear or demand answers in the debrief. They went quiet. that heavy, oppressive quiet that settles over a unit when the loss is fresh. I saw it in their eyes the next morning, hollow, focused inward. Gunny Hale sat outside the tent for hours staring at nothing, turning Rook's chess piece, a carved wooden rook he always carried, over and over in his hands. Jake Ramirez, the big Texas kid who'd started finding his initiative, didn't eat for 2 days. Doc Brennan blamed herself for not being closer to Trail when it happened. She kept replaying how many seconds it would have taken her to reach him. That loss cracked something open in all of us. It forced the first real conversation about what adaptability means when the cost is permanent. In the days that followed, I watched the psychological shift happen slowly. They didn't get reckless. They got deliberate. Questions and planning became sharper. What if the cache is empty again? What if we lose comms on exfil? What if we have to leave someone? They weren't asking out of fear. They were asking because they now understood that plans don't just fail, they can cost brothers. The biggest lesson wasn't tactical, it was mental. Adaptability isn't just adjusting fire or changing routes, it's adapting to the reality that sometimes you don't win, sometimes you don't bring everyone home and you still have to get up and go back out there tomorrow. It's learning to carry the weight without letting it paralyze you. Rook's death didn't break them, it forged them. The silence after that mission wasn't defeat, it was the sound of men rewriting their internal rules. We will adapt faster, think clearer, fight harder, so this never happens again. And the next time we went out, they did.
After Rook's loss, everything changed in the way we trained together. I called a halt to live missions for 10 days. Hire wasn't happy, but I didn't care. We weren't broken, but we were bruised deep, and rushing back into the fight with the same methods would have been reckless. Instead, we turned the compound into a laboratory for something new. Deliberate, painful rewiring of how the Marines thought about decision-making under uncertainty. We stopped running rehearsals with full scripts. No more, this is the plan, execute the plan. Instead, I threw them into scenarios designed to fail from the start. Day 1, we gave them a detailed infiltration plan, routes, timelines, actions on objective. Then, 30 minutes before step-off, I changed one critical variable. Wrong bridge out, comms blackout, HVT moved buildings, whatever would force an immediate pivot. No time to redraw overlays or request guidance, just adapt and complete the mission. The first few runs were ugly. Marines who'd been smooth and confident weeks earlier looked frustrated, almost angry. You could hear it in the after-action reviews. Sir, if we'd stuck to the original axis, we could have... Or, that wasn't realistic. Intel doesn't usually shift that fast. They weren't wrong in a conventional fight, but this wasn't conventional. Gunny Hale pulled me aside after the 3rd iteration. Commander, my guys are used to being the best at what they do because they execute flawlessly. Now it feels like you're punishing them for being good at their jobs. He wasn't complaining, he was diagnosing, and he was right. Their strength had always been precision execution inside a known framework. I was asking them to abandon the very thing that made them elite. So we adjusted again. We started layering in partial information, deliberate ambiguity. Teams got 70% of the picture, had to move, then received fragmented updates that sometimes contradicted earlier intel. The goal wasn't to make them comfortable with chaos, it was to make them faster at sensing when the plan had expired and what to replace it with. We ran decision-forcing cases at squad level. You're on exfil. Bird is 10 mics out. You find a wounded local child in the path. No medevac available. QRF closing. What do you do? No right answer, just consequences. At first, the responses were all over the map. Some wanted to halt and treat. Some wanted to bypass. A few froze entirely, cycling through regulations in their heads. But after 3 days, something started to shift. They stopped asking, is this the correct procedure, and started asking, what decision gives us the best chance to complete the mission and keep the most people alive? That was the turning point. Jake Ramirez was the first to vocalize it openly. During a night movement through a mock village, the scenario threw a curve. A supposed friendly informant turned hostile and tried to alert the village. The original plan called for non-lethal takedown and extraction for questioning, but the informant started reaching for a weapon in a crowded alley.
Jake didn't wait for my guidance as the observer. He made the call. 2 suppressed rounds, center mass, then immediate displacement of the entire element before the village could react. Harsh, permanent, but it preserved the team and the mission. Afterward, in the hot wash, he looked almost sick. I just killed a guy we were supposed to bring in. I asked him why he made the call. His answer, because if I hesitated, he'd have brought 50 fighters down on us and we'd all be dead or compromised. The mission dies. More of us die later. I chose the least bad option. That wasn't cold. That was the moment he fully internalized adaptability, making the hard shift from ideal outcome to acceptable outcome under pressure. Doc Brennan started anticipating in ways that saved us hours. She'd pre-positioned medical supplies not where the plan said the casualties would occur, but where the terrain and likely enemy avenues suggested they would. She began carrying pediatric gear after one scenario involving civilians without being told. Gunny Hale became the bridge. He stopped defending the old ways and started translating them into the new reality. He'd tell his Marines, the book isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. When the book runs out of pages, you write the next one yourself. By the end of those 10 days, the frustration had turned into focus. They weren't reckless, they were decisive. They moved with the same discipline, but now it served judgment instead of the other way around. When we finally went back into the field, the difference was night and day. They didn't need perfect plans anymore. They needed intent, boundaries, and trust. And I gave them all 3.
The second real test came 6 weeks after we resumed live operations. By then, the team had fused into something I hadn't thought possible, a joint element that moved, thought, and fought with one rhythm. This mission was uglier from the start. Higher priority, tighter timeline, 0 margin for error. Objective: extract a local intelligence source who'd been burned. He was holed up in a safe house inside a mid-sized city controlled by hostile militias. Window to get him out? 4 hours, between dusk prayer and the shift change of the neighborhood checkpoints. After that, the streets would flood with patrols looking for him. Comms were spotty. Jamming in the area was heavy. No drone overwatch, no QRF closer than 90 minutes. Abort criteria was strict. If we weren't clear of the city with the package by 02:30, we were on our own. We inserted in 3 chalks: civilian vehicles, local dress, staggered timings. My SEALs took point and rear security, the Marines handled the middle element and the assault package if it went loud. Everyone carried suppressed weapons, no uniforms, nothing that screamed American if we got rolled up. Compared to the first joint op, the differences were stark. Movement through the city was fluid. No rigid formations, just loose, purposeful walking, eyes scanning rooftops and alleys. Hand signals were minimal, almost telepathic. When a militia truck rolled past unexpectedly, the entire team melted into doorways and shadows without a word. No hesitation, no bunching up. Jake Ramirez, now carrying the breaching kit, casually leaned against a wall smoking a cigarette he'd bummed off a shopkeeper minutes earlier, blending perfectly while covering our flank. Calms were limited to bursts, but the Marines had adapted to our style, short, intent-based. No more requesting permission to displace, just moving to Overwatch Alpha 2, cover. And they did it. We reached the safe house quiet. The source was there, shaken but alive, with his wife and 2 kids. That was the first unplanned variable. The original intel said solo male. Now we had 4 packages, 2 of them small children who couldn't move fast or stay silent under stress. Most teams would have frozen on that reveal. Extracting civilians, especially kids in a hot urban environment, multiplies risk exponentially. But Gunny Hale didn't blink. He looked at the kids, looked at me, and simply said, "We take them all, no discussion." We reorganized on the spot. Doc Brennan took point on the family, calming the mother, carrying the younger child in a sling she improvised from his shamog. Jake and 2 others collapsed the security perimeter to escort duty. We shifted to the alternate exfil route, longer, through narrower alleys but fewer checkpoints. That's when the real test hit. Halfway to the extraction point, we turned a corner into a pop-up checkpoint. 4 armed militiamen, vehicle across the road, floodlights just coming on. No way around. Abort meant leaving the family to certain death. Going loud meant the whole city waking up. 30 meters of open ground, 10 seconds to decide. I was about to call for a diversion when Gunny Hale made the move. Without a word, he stepped forward alone, hands visible, speaking in broken local dialect, something he'd picked up from our terps over the previous weeks. He played drunk, stumbling, laughing too loud, drawing all 4 guards' attention while gesturing vaguely behind him like he was looking for a party.
It bought us 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, 2 of my snipers shifted quietly to rooftops earlier, dropped the 2 guards with weapons raised. The other 2 turned, confused. Jake and a Marine sergeant closed from the flank with knives before they could shout. Silent, clean. We dragged the bodies into a doorway, tossed the vehicle keys down a storm drain, and kept moving. The whole engagement lasted under 20 seconds. No shots fired beyond suppressed .22s from the roofs. No alarm raised. The family never even broke stride. Doc had her hand over the older child's mouth, whispering in his ear the whole time. He didn't make a sound. We cleared the city with 12 minutes to spare. The birds came in hot on a dry riverbed outside town, rotors kicking up dust under NVGs. Everyone loaded, everyone accounted for. It wasn't perfect. One Marine took a knife graze during the close takedown. We left blood trail that might get tracked later. The source's cover was permanently blown, which would have ripple effects we couldn't control. But we adapted, in real time under lethal pressure, and we brought everyone home. Sitting on the hello floor as we climbed out, the mother clutching her kids, the source weeping silently in relief, I looked across at Gunny Hale. He was checking his team, counting heads like always, but there was something different in his eyes. Not triumph, acceptance. He caught my look and just nodded once. No one cheered. No one needed to. That night proved it. They weren't just executing better plans. They were thinking, deciding, owning the chaos. The same Marines who'd once waited half a beat too long for the next order in sequence were now the ones writing the sequence as it unfolded. Adaptability fully forged. In the dark, under fire, with children's lives on the line, they didn't bend. They became the situation's new rule.
There's a fear that every commander carries, one we never put in official reports or talk about in leadership briefs. It lives in the quiet space between issuing an order and watching men move to execute it. It's the knowledge that a single sentence from your mouth, go left, hold here, take that building, can end lives. Not enemy lives, ours. I felt it on every deployment, but it grew heavier during these joint cycles with the Marines. Early on, when I still wasn't sure they could flex fast enough in the gray, every call carried an extra edge. If I pushed them into a situation that demanded instant adaptation and they froze, even for a second, someone would pay for it, and the bill would come to me first. After Rook's death, that fear sharpened into something almost physical. I'd lie awake in the rack listening to the generators outside, replaying the ambush in my head, asking if I'd missed a sign, if I'd asked too much too soon. Command is lonely by design, but that stretch felt isolating in a new way. I couldn't show doubt to my SEALs. They needed the rock. I couldn't vent to the Marines. They were still proving themselves to us and to themselves. So I carried it alone, until the night of the city extraction, when Gunny Hale stepped forward to play drunk at that checkpoint and bought us the seconds we needed. Watching him make that call without looking back at me for confirmation, knowing the risk he was taking, I felt something shift. The fear didn't disappear. It never does. But it changed shape. It stopped being fear of their rigidity and became the normal, everyday fear of sending good men into harm's way. Because by then I knew they weren't rigid anymore. They were ready. That mission earned them my full trust, the kind that doesn't need second guessing. And with trust came a deeper respect than I'd expected. I've always respected Marines as an institution, the history, the ethos, the way they turn 18-year-olds into disciplined warriors faster and more completely than anyone else. But this was personal. I respected these specific Marines. Jake's raw courage finding its brain, Gunny's willingness to burn his own doctrinal scripture when lives demanded it, Doc's quiet transformation from perceived weak link to indispensable force multiplier. They didn't become SEALs. Thank God for that. They stayed Marines, aggressive, loyal to a fault, grounded in that unbreakable team-first mentality. But they layered onto it something we specialize in, the ability to read chaos like sheet music and improvise without missing a beat. And that hybrid scared me a little, in the best way, because it was more dangerous than either force alone. I realized something else in those final weeks. Adaptability isn't just a tactical skill.
It's a character trait. It's humility enough to know the plan might be wrong the second reality intrudes. It's ego strength to make the hard call without waiting for consensus. It's moral courage to live with the consequences. The Marines I served with didn't lack any of those qualities when they arrived. The Corps had already instilled them. What we did together, what the missions forced us to do, was strip away the layers of doctrine that sometimes buried those traits under procedure. When you clear that away, what's left is the core. Men and women willing to think, to feel the weight, and to act anyway. I'm prouder of what those Marines became than any target we ever took down. Because targets come and go, enemies regroup, but the growth I watched in them, the way they rewrote themselves under fire, that's permanent. And it saved lives. Theirs, ours, civilians we never met. That's the part I carry now when the fear creeps in on quiet nights. Not just the weight of command, but the privilege of it. I got to watch warriors become something more. I wouldn't trade that for anything.
What covert warfare taught me about human beings is simple and brutal. We are capable of far more than we believe, but only when the comfortable choice is ripped away. In the shadows, where plans die fast and the margin between survival and catastrophe is measured in seconds, people reveal who they really are. Some shrink, some rise, and the ones who rise highest are rarely the loudest or the strongest on day one. They're the ones willing to let go of what they thought they knew and grab hold of what the moment demands. That's what I saw in those Marines, over and over. They arrived with a proud identity built on centuries of tradition, semper fi, first to fight, never quit. That identity gave them incredible strength in conventional battle, where clarity and overwhelming force win the day. But in our world, that same identity could have been a trap, clinging to the way things are supposed to be done while reality laughed and rewrote the rules. Yet they didn't cling. They let the fire burn away the parts that no longer served and kept the core, loyalty, courage, discipline. Then they built something new on top of it. Why could they do what seemed impossible at the start? Because the Marine Corps doesn't just train fighters, it builds character. It teaches young men and women to put the mission and their brothers above themselves. It instills a tolerance for suffering that most people never have to develop. And most importantly, it creates a culture where questioning orders isn't rebellion, it's how you stay alive. All we did was push that culture into deeper water, force it to swim without the usual lifelines of clear doctrine and overwhelming support. The result wasn't just better operators, it was better human beings. Jake Ramirez went from a kid afraid of making the wrong call to a man who trusted his judgment under fire. Gunny Hale traded comfortable certainty for the harder freedom of owning every decision. Doc Brennan turned self-doubt into quiet, unbreakable competence. They didn't lose who they were, they became more. And that's the message I carry now, long after the missions ended. Adaptability isn't reserved for special operations, it's the defining skill of life outside the wire, too. When your career plan collapses because the industry changes overnight, when a diagnosis upends everything you thought your future would be, when a relationship ends or a child struggles or the world shifts in ways no one saw coming, in those moments, rigidity kills dreams the same way it kills teams in combat. The people who survive, who thrive, are the ones who can look at the wreckage of the old plan and ask, what needs to happen now so I can keep moving forward? They grieve what's lost, they honor it, then they adapt. They learn new skills at 40, they rebuild communities after disasters. They find meaning when the old sources dry up, they bend without breaking. I've seen it proven in the darkest places on Earth. The human spirit under real pressure is capable of astonishing flexibility. And the foundation for that flexibility isn't genius or privilege or luck.
It's the same foundation the Marine Corps builds every day. Discipline, loyalty to something bigger than yourself, and the quiet refusal to quit. Anyone can develop it. Pressure just accelerates the process. So if you're facing a moment where the script got torn up and you don't know what comes next, remember the Marines who walked into our world thinking they knew how to fight, only to discover the fight required them to become something more. They did it. So can you. In war and in life, the ones who make it through aren't always the strongest or the smartest. They're the ones who adapt.
It's December 29, 2025, just past midnight. The forward operating base is quiet for once. No rotors spooling up, no frantic radio chatter, no muffled explosions echoing from distant training ranges. The red lamps still glow over the digital maps, but the screens are dimmed now, markers frozen on completed objectives. The ventilation fans hum their same low song, but the air feels different, lighter, like the storm is finally past. I'm still in the same chair, plate carrier finally off, a cold cup of coffee beside me that I haven't touched in hours. The team is racked out or in the gym burning off whatever's left. We're rotating home in waves starting next week. The Joint Task Force stood down yesterday. Official reports are filed, medals recommended, lessons learned packaged neatly for the next rotation. But this confession isn't for them. This is the last thing I need to say before I close the book on this chapter. I've spent months telling you about rigidity and adaptability, about plans dying and men rising, about Marines who walked into our world and refused to be left behind it. I've told you how they changed, how they earned my trust, how they became something more than even their own proud history prepared them for. What I haven't said enough is how much I owe them. They didn't just adapt to our missions, they forced me to adapt too, to my own assumptions, my own quiet prejudices about who belongs in the shadows and who doesn't. They reminded me that leadership isn't about being the smartest guy in the room. It's about recognizing strength wherever it shows up and getting the hell out of its way. I will carry Rook Morrison's name with me forever, and I will carry the memory of every Marine who stepped forward when the plan failed, who made the hard call, who dragged a terrified child through a hostile city so he could grow up free. They never asked for thanks. Marines don't, but they have it anyway. Deep, abiding, the kind that doesn't need words. So here's my final confession, the one no after-action report will ever capture. In the darkness, the ones who survive, who bring their brothers home, who complete the mission when everything says it's impossible, aren't always the strongest, the fastest, or the ones with the most impressive schools on their records. They're the ones who adapt fastest, not because they abandon who they are, but because they become what the moment and their brothers need them to be. To Jake, Gunny, Doc, and every Marine who walked this road with us, you didn't just prove you could operate in our world, you made our world better. Semper Fi, and thank you.